This is my R5C rig, and in this video I'm going to give you a detailed breakdown. I obviously got a little pile of accessories, so let's screw them all together. It starts with this rod clamp. Unfortunately, it's not available as a single piece as far as I know. You have to get it in a set of two together with a base plate. And I'm using this quick release clamp that will allow me to easily attach and detach the camera. It comes with this big screw so that I can now screw both pieces together. And I will add a second little M4 screw to prevent any twisting. That screw is also included in that base plate kit, but it's black, which obviously doesn't matter. Make sure that everything is straight. It doesn't really lock into the right position, so you have to tighten the screws a little bit and then make some small adjustments and then tighten it completely. There are some alternatives to this rod clamp. For example, there's the SmallRig base plate with integrated dual 15mm rod clamp. It's a cheaper solution, but a bit bigger. Anyway, as a next step, I'll attach the quick release plate to the bottom so that I can later mount the rig on a tripod, for example. And like before, I first screw in the big screw and then add a second M4 screw to make it more stable against rotation. Also here, make sure that everything is nice and straight and then tighten the screws completely. Okay, now we're done with this part. Now let's look into this awesome battery hinge from SmallRig. This is one of my favorite pieces because it solves a big problem of this camera setup where the battery is behind the camera. Normally you would not be able to flap out the screen of the camera without taking it completely out of the rig. With this hinge, however, it's relatively easy because we can fold the battery down. So first I'm going to mount longer rods to it. In order to do that, you have to use two rod connectors that can be screwed into the rods of the hinge. Once they're in, they're a bit hard to get off again, so that's why I kept mine in for this video. Anyway, I'm using 4" or 10cm rods here. For some reason, there's a little gap when the rods are screwed together, but don't worry, the connection is very stable. Now we can slide the first part on the rods and tighten the wing nuts. A nice feature of those is that you can lift and rotate them to have them point at a certain direction that is least obtrusive. Okay, next we have to install this V-mount plate that will later hold the battery. Normally you can just screw it on the hinge. However, I also want to mount this D-tap multiplier from ZITAY to it so that it sits directly under the battery. And this is a bit tricky. What I'm using for this is an L-shaped mount from SmallRig that is not an official product as far as I know. They sent this to me as a kind of present after I made some suggestions for its usage in their Facebook group. I hope they will sell it on the regular website soon. If you want one too right now, you can probably send them an email and ask them if they can make one for you. Anyway, once you have it, you can screw it under the battery plate with those very short 1/4" screws. You will notice that the edge extends a bit over the battery plate. And this is actually a problem because we want to attach this whole thing to the hinge. And for that it would be better if the pieces were on the same plane. We will kind of solve that in a minute. But first we will connect the plate to the hinge with two 1/4" screws. When I turn this around, you see that I let those screws go into those neighborhood holes here, which makes the battery plate a bit shifted to the side. And this is important so that the red knob for releasing the battery will not come against the camera's viewfinder. Now I'm going to add two more 1/4" screws from this side, which will just act as spacers. And as I showed before, this is necessary to even out the L-shaped piece below. This is not a beautiful solution, but it works. Now we can finally install the D-tap splitter. For that, you need an M5 screw that is at least 1.5 cm long without the head. And you also need a corresponding nut and two washers. You can get those in a hardware store. However, the washers that I got are a bit too big for what I'm going to do, but the washer under the wing nut of the hinge is actually perfect. You can see that it's a very small one compared to the one on the bottom from the hardware store. So I'll put the bigger one back under the wing nut and keep the small one for later. Now I'll put the other big one on the screw and stick it through the D-tap splitter. Then I'll set it on the L-shaped piece. And now I'll put the small washer on the screw from behind and also add the nut. Now I'll tighten the screw while holding the nut with my finger. Some fine adjustments, and we're done. Now let's add the battery and attach the cable. The cable of the D-tap splitter is normally longer, so I shortened mine down to 14 centimeters. As far as I know, you can contact ZITAY before you buy it and tell them the custom length you would want. I would highly recommend that instead of shortening it yourself. The original D-tap plug is glued together, so you cannot open it. I had to get a separate D-tap plug for this. You can find them on eBay, but they usually don't have the rubber kink protection included. I finally found a seller who could provide me with this, and that was Alvin's Cables. It's not an official product, so you will have to contact them. At least it worked for me when I was ordering other cables as well. Okay, that's it for this part of the rig. Now let's talk about the camera cage. It's SmallRig's R5 cage that also fits the R5C. It's Arca Swiss compatible on the bottom, so that we can fit it later on our quick release clamp without any additional parts. I chose this cage over the R5C Black Mamba version because of its style or material and the extra mounting options. I think this is a matter of taste, so decide for yourself what you like better. Both of them work. I already have my hand strap installed. It's the Canon E2. There's also a SmallRig hand strap that would work as well, among others. No matter which one you get, this is one of the most underrated accessories in my opinion. It's so much more comfortable to hold the camera with it. Okay, now let's put the camera into the cage. There are 3 screws at the bottom. 2 of them are actually just pins that stabilize the camera. The cage comes with this handy little screwdriver that is not only usable for installing the cage, but comes in handy quite often. This takes some time, don't rush it, and make sure not to make scratches in the camera. And that's it. The cage has a really nice shape. I actually never take it off, even if I'm using the camera without any accessories. However, now I'm going to attach it to the battery part that we built before. But first I will put the dummy battery in. I'm using the one from Alvin's Cables with the D-tap plug. The camera has a little slot for the cable so that we can close the flap. And then we will hook it up to the D-tap splitter. The cable length of my dummy battery is 20 centimeters. It's normally longer and coiled, but I told Alvin's Cables that I wanted it differently and they made a custom one for me. That way everything looks really organized. Now let's put the lens in. I sometimes use a matte box, mainly because the regular sun hood does not fit over my ND filter. The SmallRig matte box is really lightweight and very nice. You have to screw this round piece on the lens first. There are different ones for different filter thread sizes, and then the matte box is just clamped onto it. For the top handle, I picked the NICEYRIG top handle for ARRI connector because it is so small and it can be connected directly to the cage. There's also a NATO version of it, but I didn't want to mount a NATO rail on the cage. There's also the SmallRig mini top handle, which is even smaller, I think, but it does not fit on the R5C cage. The distance of the screws is different somehow. I think there's an updated version that will work with that cage, but it still requires screwing. And I like to be able to remove the handle quickly, for example, when I want to put the camera in my bag. So my microphone is the Rode VideoMic NTG with the windshield. It can just be mounted on that cold shoe mount on the side of the cage. I will change something about this in a minute though. But first let's mount the external monitor. I have the DesView R7. It has this screw hole at the bottom. Normally you could use those typical monitor mounts, but I like NATO connectors better. So that's why I mount this NATO rail on the monitor. And then I use this monitor mount with a NATO clamp on the top and a cold shoe on the bottom. I got this custom made from SmallRig. The advantage is that you can put this directly on the camera using the cold shoe mount when you are not using the cage. Now, however, I'd rather have one with the ARRI connector at the bottom, because then it would fit directly on the top handle as well as on the cage when I don't use the top handle. But for now, I'm going to mount this cold shoe on the top handle. And then I can slide in the monitor mount. So you can see that now there is not enough space for the monitor because the microphone is in the way. And that's why I'm going to put together a microphone holder. I use this other small monitor mount from SmallRig, where I removed the thumb screw by opening the side screws. Then you have this threaded hole at the top that we can use to mount this cold shoe. And then we have this nice tiltable cold shoe extension. And with that we can mount the microphone a bit further apart from the camera, which then leaves enough space for the monitor. Last thing, cables. I use this very thin HDMI cable from SmallRig and the power cable that was included in the monitor package. And that's pretty much it. I hope this was helpful for you, and see you in the next video.